We are now 8 days away, Matt Hasselbeck days away from the start of Seahawks training camp at the VMAC in Renton. Can't wait to get football started, real football with pads and everything coming up very soon. You'll be able to be there on the berm. I'll be there. In fact, I am packing all of this up and hitting the road tomorrow to head back to Seattle to cover training camp. But before we do that, there is nobody I could think of that would be better to have on for one last 360-degree look at this team coming off the offseason, expectations heading into training camp, and some news today about contract extensions and how they might impact some of the players on the Seahawks roster and how the Seahawks should approach some of their contractual situations, including a potential hiccup and maybe a holdout from their second-round picks, or at least their first second-round pick. Is Nick Emenwari poised to hold out of camp? Rob Staton of the Seahawks Draft Blog, good friend of the show, is joining me next to talk about all of that. This is Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
If you would, please do me the honor of subscribing to the channel if you don't already. It's just that big red button down there. Just hit that. It doesn't cost anything. You won't get any notifications. You'll just see new episodes when you log into YouTube and see your recommendations. Now, if you do want to get notifications anytime I post new material, just hit that bell button and that will do that for you. All the other ways that you can help support me as an independent full-time content creator are linked down below, including my Substack, if you prefer written word, my Patreon, where you can get everything ad-free plus bonus material, and some of the more direct ways down below as well. If you've never read the Seahawks Draft Blog, you should. Rob Staton has really made a name for himself over the last 10 years. He also works for the BBC covering football over there, European football. And he's one of the best in the business at analyzing the team and balancing. We know how much we love balance here on this channel. The objectivity from a journalistic standpoint with the passion of being a fan. And stick around till the end because he makes a bold prediction for this team this year that nobody has made on this show up till this point. And I think, well, I know you're going to love it. So stick around for that. This is Rob Staton of the Seahawks Draft Blog. Rob, it's good to see you again, as always. Thanks for taking the time to be on the show. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Really busy with the day job, but I really, really want training camp to start. So I have something else to occupy my brain for a while. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to flying out to Seattle for week one. So that cannot get here quickly enough, in my opinion. I can't wait to be out there for the Niners game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like this offseason was a little bit more pronounced than normal because, you know, once the floodgates opened and the offseason started and the moves began with at least how it pertains to the Seattle Seahawks, like it just got so crazy so fast. And we kind of rode that wave all the way through minicamp that this dead period feels more dead this year than it has in a while. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here before I take a little break these next few days and head back to camp is, you know, I always just love having you on for wide-ranging kind of big picture conversations. And with camp, you know, almost a week away now, it's kind of the time to do that. But we got a little bit of news today that we get to talk about, and that's fun. It's extension season in the NFL. And I want to start there because a lot of stuff's been happening today. We saw a huge deal handed down to Trey Smith by the Kansas City Chiefs today. We saw Sauce Gardner cash in. We're going to talk about what that means. We've seen some of these other extensions trickle in, and John Schneider typically, at least in recent years, gets big extensions done the second week of camp pretty often. DK's, Julian Love. There's some recent examples where end of the month after camp has started, they get extensions done. There are a number of young players that are eligible, and we've all talked about them throughout the offseason. But it's an interesting group, isn't it? It's a bunch of young guys coming off their rookie deals, obviously, guys that all have high ceilings, big upsides. We've been waiting for them to hit. But none of the guys in that particular group seem to be no-brainers, seem to be obvious candidates for contract extensions. The one that I've talked about the most on this show that would make the most sense is Charles Cross, left tackle. They give him the fifth-year option, so there is no real immediacy or sense of urgency. You wrote a piece today campaigning for not signing him to an extension right now. Why?
There was a really interesting quote that somebody posted in the comments section on Seahawks Draft Blog, and it said, "I would draft a player for what he could become, but I wouldn't give a player a second contract for what he could become."
Love that.
And I think that was a really interesting point from that individual called Mick, because I get the feeling for the last 2 years we've gone into the season expecting this is going to be Charles Cross's year. This is when he's going to take that big next step. And if I think back to last season, 2 or 3 weeks into the season, like for example, Brock and Solk were doing a piece on who would you extend if you could now? And they were, oh, Charles Cross, yeah, we'd definitely extend Charles Cross. So even already at the start of the season last year, people were sort of the mindset that he was taking that next step. And yet when you actually look at his season overall, there's a lot of things there that were not, wasn't perhaps as good as people are making out. So, for example, his 47 total pressures for the season were the 5th most in the league. That was the same as J.C. Latham, who was a rookie drafted by the Titans, who played right tackle at Alabama. For me, was always going to be best suited at guard. They moved him over to left tackle for some reason. So, the same number of pressures as J.C. Latham is not great. That's the 5th most in the league. His 36 hurries conceded were the 4th most in the league. In true pass sets, he gave up 25 hurries, again, 5th most in the league. And his 34 pressures were 8th most in the league. ESPN, Jeremy Fowler at ESPN put out an article this week, and he's doing this for, I think, most positions. And you can certainly argue the toss over whether some of these lists are truly valid or not, because in some, there are players missing that you would expect to be there. But on the left tackle one, and he's spoken to executives, coaches, and scouts, he did not have Charles Cross amongst the 10 best tackles in the league, or the 5 players that he named as an honourable mention. If you are going to pay Charles Cross a very handsome contract, make him one of the, I would imagine if he signs an extension this summer, he's going to be one of the top 3 paid offensive tackles in the league. I would imagine that he should be listed by league executive scouts and coaches amongst the 15 best left tackles in the NFL. So for me, I still think he's in prove it mode. I would be more than happy to say, play out the 2025 season. If you have an excellent season, if you take that step forward now with a better coaching staff and a better offensive scheme, that's what I'm expecting from the Seahawks this year. If it costs you a little bit more next year, but you know that he's taken that next step, I am absolutely fine with that. What I don't want to do is pay him now, have a 4th consecutive season where you're kind of left wanting a little bit more, and now you're tied to him for years to come.
Yeah, it's tough. Maybe at that position as much as any others, because even if he goes out again, you make some great points. And I love that quote from Mick too, because I do think we get caught up in that. We still, second contracts especially, we pay young players. In many cases, I think you can make an argument that Sauce Gardner just got paid based on his draft.
Yes.
His draft position more so than his production on the field. But when you talk about a guy like Charles Cross, who's still, I think he's just 24 years old. He was really young when he entered the draft at a position like that. Even if he goes out and has another okay season where he's, in the middle of the pack in pass block rates and PFF grades and all those kinds of things, doesn't take that clear step that we all want. If he hits the open market next season, you see what a guy like Dan Moore gets, for crying out loud. Yeah. He's going to get paid. Someone's going to pay him franchise money, which kind of paints the Seahawks in a little bit of a corner.
Well, the good thing that they've got is they've got this next season. Because of the 5th-year option, he's under contract for 2026 as well. So if you didn't want to pay him
at an okay number, I'm okay paying him 17 and a half, I think is the tag number. Yeah,
absolutely. So you've got 2 years of control. Then you've got the control of the franchise tag as well if you wanted to use that. So really, you've got 3 years with Charles Cross where you don't really have any urgency to do anything now. And that's the thing. If you could get a deal done with him now and you feel like you're getting a bargain, then I think that's totally justifiable. If you want to do that deal, if you believe that he is going to take that next step, if you get him at a price range that you think this is a really excellent deal to have this now, that it's going to cost way more in the future to get him signed up, I think that's fine. If the difference in cost is not, if he's already going to be expected to be, let's say, the 2nd highest paid left tackle when you paid him, I think you're better off waiting and having that extra season under your belt, knowing, yes, we have got somebody who can be a franchise left tackle. I think what you said about Sauce Gardner is exactly right. And I think there is a little bit of that with Charles Cross. I think people have just, he's a top 10 left tackle. And I wrote about this as well. I think people remember what happened when Russell Okung left. Like Russell Okung was kind of a similar player in that top 10 pick, was good, not great, was kind of, was an okay player, wasn't a bad player, but wasn't one that you would rush to sign.
Yeah.
And he left after 5 years and moved on. And then the Seahawks had this period where it was a total shambles at left tackle until they traded for Dwayne Brown. And I think people worry that if you just got to a point where Charles Cross moves on in 2 years, let's say, are they going to end up in the same boat? And the two things I would say to that is, I don't think you should ever pay a player for the fear of what might happen if you lose them. I think you've got to justify paying a player because they are worth the contract. And I think it's a good highlight for Sauce Gardner. I think it is for Garrett Wilson, and I think it will be for other players. Do not pay a good player elite money. You have to pay your top players the money to keep them. And I think if you rush to sign an extension with Charles Cross now, you're going to end up giving him elite money. Sometimes you've got to play the game a little bit. Yeah. Sometimes you have got to get a little bit close to that free agency market. You've got to let a player and his agent go to the combine, have a conversation with one or two other teams, find out what they're worth before doing a deal. And I would not be rushing to do that deal now. I don't think Charles Cross is a bad player. I'm all for keeping Charles Cross for the long term, but only at the right price. And I'm not sure doing the deal now is necessary when he's under contract for 2 more years.
There's another dynamic at work here as well. It might have been easier to get one of those sort of team-friendly deals that you're talking about before he decided to enlist with an agency, because he represented himself as a rookie, as I believe all rookies should. I don't know why you would pay 3% to somebody to negotiate a deal that's slotted for you. But that being said, he recently joined he got professional representation and joined an agency. And I doubt that they're going to be looking right out of the gate to be handing out any kind of discount to Seattle on their side of things. You mentioned, another one that's almost all, except for the Trey Smith one, because the Seahawks don't have to worry about paying an interior offensive lineman for at least 2 years. So I guess they have that going for them. But all these other extensions today could have an impact on what we see here over the next 12 months in Seattle. Garrett Wilson signs for a big deal, which could be very, very comparable to what Jackson Smith and Jigba is looking for a year from now. And then certainly what we saw from Sauce Gardner with Riq Woolen eligible now. Now, he's one that I've been pretty outspoken. I don't think anyone really falls on the side of he needs to be extended now. He's another guy. You need to see it for 1 more year, don't you?
Yes, I think so.
Certainly before we talk about Sauce Gardner money. I mean, this is a guy that the big debate when they both came out the same year was who's better. And did Riq have a better rookie year than Sauce Gardner? Some feel like he did. And now here, Sauce with a 8 digit, I guess.
Sauce Gardner has done an exceptional job of promoting himself since coming into the league. His draft sort of profile and the character, the nickname as a first name, Sauce. Yeah. That having the chain with Sauce on it, sort of basically recruiting Rich Eisen to promote you as a player for the Jets in the top 5, throughout the process. He had a very productive time during that, and he had a good rookie year. And then it just hasn't really happened for him since then. Yeah. With Riq Woolen, I think the problem that I have with him is that athletically, he could be the best cornerback in the league. And there are just too many occasions where he's on planet Riq Woolen. He's not concentrating. He's not living up to his potential. I don't know if he's taking this as seriously as he should be. And I think the problem that you get now is that as he approaches this contract year, it's if he turns it on now, what is this individual going to be like when he's got FU money? Is he then going to settle in? Is he going to relax? Is he going to become even more of a inconsistent player who maybe you can't trust on the field to do every single thing that you want him to do? Or is it just the start of the new mature Riq Woolen? I think for me, you let him play out this season. You have to then let him probably reach the market and stay in touch with him and see how it goes. Now, if he has a 10 interception season, maybe I'll change my mind on that. But I think at the moment he's heading towards, you let him speak to teams at the combine, which is what happens, and then you make a judgment call on how much you're willing to spend this guy. But it's difficult, and there aren't many cornerbacks in the league who are getting massive money. It's kind of like a handful of good cornerbacks who are getting elite money. We're not in an era at the minute with like the top echelon corners, really. I don't think, anyway. And I'd be hesitant to put him into that bracket now. I think it's one to sort of suck it and see with him.
He certainly took notice. He tweeted moments after the news broke about Gardner's extension that, all the eyeball emojis. So he certainly knows what's going on. I do feel when it comes to Reek, I feel like the team at least must be confident that he has that next level in him and that level of responsibility. We know what happened last year. We know the suspension where he was sat to start a game, and there are reports that it was, he had missed curfew, that maybe some of the things he was doing off the field weren't as professional as they would like. But we know the standards that the Seahawks have, and we've seen those standards applied even in the 1 year that we've seen with Mike McDonald at the helm, where there was at least, unless it escaped the eye of every single nose of every reporter out there was no effort at all to shop him or potentially move him this offseason. I feel like if they had concerns about those aspects of his personality or his commitment to the game, they would have, because they just don't mess with players like that. So at least I think for this year, they believe that maybe they can get that one more year out of him.
Yeah, I think the fact that he's tweeting about that is part of the problem.
It's not great.
I got the sense that
I don't love it.
I got the sense that Mike McDonald just isn't having Tariq Woolen. That's what I thought last year, that he's not. I think Mike McDonald wants tough, reliable, physical. And when you are watching Julian Love yelling at Tariq Woolen to go over there and make that tackle or whatever it was, I can't remember what the play was, but there was a safety shout at him to get into position and do something and shift last season, and it kind of stuff like that sticks in the memory. And it's no good being a flashy player and making some good plays and sort of having all these physical characteristics if you are not going to, give it absolutely everything week in, week out. The thing about Richard Sherman is Richard Sherman was obviously a good athlete, but he was not Reek Woolen level athlete. But in terms of mastering his craft, there's probably not been a player. Certainly, I can't think of any cornerback who has got more out of his being than Richard Sherman has in terms of preparation and execution and knowledge of a system. Now, if Reek Woolen just needs like 35% of that, and his physical tools will do the rest. And I don't know if he's at 5% of that. And that's really what you want to see this year. And even then, I would be wary of paying the guy. Like there are some players who I don't know what they. And look, it's up to him to shut people like me up, to go and have a great year, get a massive contract, be even better once he's got that contract. There are some players who, like, if Jackson Smith and Jigba gets a new contract, I don't think you are going to see any difference in him as an individual or as a player.
Yeah.
If Reek Woolen gets a contract like Sauce Gardner, I am not convinced I can answer that the same way. So we'll see.
Were you disappointed that they didn't come out of the draft with one? Wasn't a great class, but there were some guys on the first 2 days.
I'm trying to think who I liked. I have to look at my draft board. I can't remember. I thought they probably would take one, but then they took two the year before when I didn't think they were going to take one.
Right.
And neither of those two players have really amounted to anything yet. I know one of them's still on the team, the other one not. I'm just dragging up my 2025 draft board now because that draft feels like such a long time ago.
Yeah.
So
it really fell off. The class really fell off a cliff after the third round. I felt like at the time that the decision to take a quarterback when they did probably took that off the table.
Yeah, I think there were players like Jordan Hancock that I liked more than the mainstream, and Caleb Ransaw and people like that. But I there were just so many question marks. Like, unless you were going to take Jade Barron in the first round, which I never expected them to go down that road when they had such a need on the offensive line. But, he was their kind of player. You've got Will Johnson with injury issues, Maxwell Hairston, who got all sorts of character flags that we've since heard more about recently. Siobhan Revell, I really liked as a player, but again, was recovering from a serious knee injury. Benjamin Morrison was coming back from injury as well. And Azariah Thomas, just testing wise, there were limitations there. So I think once you get to sort of day three, there were players that I would have been open-minded to, but I genuinely liked what they did across the draft. So there was I didn't come out the draft thinking, I wish they'd done this, I wish they'd done that. I do think they've got a little bit of an issue there. I think the competition at cornerback it can be better. I'm not a huge fan of, I never really thought Shaquille Griffin was that good when he was here the first time. Right. And he's back now. Now, I suppose there's a camp depth, competition. If you get an injury, you can chuck him in there for a few games. That's fine. But it would be nice if they had sort of a young, upcoming potential Reek Woolen replacement if he moves on, who you're sort of excited to see a bit more of in camp.
Now, some of the other contract things that I want to touch on, and then we'll get to maybe the most pressing in the moment. Ken Walker's another one. I'm on record as saying, running backs are tricky anyway. They've got a loaded room there. He still hasn't proven he can stay healthy for 17 games. It's who else am I thinking of? So we got Cross. Maffe's the other one. Like I haven't seen anything from Boye Mafe other than, athletic talent and flashes. Obviously, we saw the 7-game streak where he had a sack, but then there's games where he just, you forget that he's on the roster, frankly. And I'm not sure that he's that Mike McDonald type edge that really does all the nasty, dirty work and sets the edge the way that he wants to. But I feel like he's in the same camp as those other guys that need to see it for another year. They probably would be open to and would like for him to stick long-term, but they need to see it. And then Kobe Bryant is in a different bucket, I think, because he's a guy that if you're paying him now, if you're thinking about extending him, you are doing it somewhat on projection. And to Mick's point that, sometimes you do hand out a contract to a guy because of what you think he can become, but we're just not talking about top of the market money for a guy like that. Is there anybody else that you would be comfortable with or that you really hope to see extended this year?
I think with Kobe Bryant, I'd probably wait until the season started. And if that's one that you do during the season, because he's performing very, very well and reward him for that, I think that'd be good. Otherwise, I think he's one that you may have to run the risk of him having a good season, and then you have to do a deal around the time of free agency beginning. Boye Mafe, I agree with you. I think most people are there with Boye Mafe in that he can produce 8 sacks a season, and he's pretty good at getting that one sack, and you say, oh, that's another sack for Boye Mafe, but there's not, you don't really feel his presence on the field. Like with Cliff Averill, who he's not, in terms of body type and testing, he's not that different to. With Cliff Averill, you could feel the pressures. You could feel the consistent pressure. It wasn't just he's going to have one play a game where he bends the arc, straightens, and gets to the quarterback. It was like, no, there is that consistent pressure there with Cliff. And with Boye Mafe, he's never taken that next step. He is a bit like Charles Cross in that regard. You want to see, like, come on now, be a game changer, be a difference maker. And he hasn't done that. And because the market is very expensive for pass rushers, I think it's almost impossible to sort of consider doing a deal with him. I think he's another player who, if it's more of the same this year, you have to let him reach the market, and then you have to try and, I don't think there'd be any problem with bringing him back to be in your rotation, but unless he shows that he takes the next step, he's a replaceable level player. So I think that's that with him. And then with Ken Walker, one of the bigger, I think, more recent disappointments, I would say, because the talent is so clear. Like the talent is there, the frame is there, the athleticism is there for him to be one of the best 3 running backs in the league, to be somebody who can do it all, who can be a home run hitter, short yardage, pass catching threat, everything. Like he should be 3 years into his career, we should be talking about him as one of the better running backs in the NFL. And he just can't stay healthy. It's absolutely maddening that when you watch him play, you are kind of waiting for the one play where he will come up limping or going off to the sideline, never to be seen again. And if you can't stay healthy at running back, you ain't going to last very long, I'm afraid. And the thing that I fear is that we're going to have another injury-ravaged season. He's going to go somewhere else, and then all of a sudden stay healthy for the next 4 years and go on to realize his potential with another team. And that's, I suppose, the other thing you have to guard against from Seattle's perspective. How many chances does one guy get before you eventually move on? And the other thing I would say about this is Zach Charbonnet as a change of pace or spell runner doesn't look very effective. But when Ken Walker was out last year and Zach Charbonnet was the lead runner, he looked really, really good. And I'm of the mindset now that I think with the style that you want to play, I'd be giving Zach Charbonnet the lead running back job. And I would be saying to Ken Walker, we're going to manage you a little bit because you're the one who's not been able to show that you can stay healthy. Now, 3 or 4 games into the season, if Ken Walker is playing lights out and Zach Charbonnet is not, you can change that. You don't have to make that decision in week 1 and then stick with it till week 18. Like you can change your mind on that. But I think Charbonnet has shown that he's better as a lead runner, and Ken Walker, whenever he is a lead runner, is always injured. So I would flip it around for this season. But I'm not paying Ken Walker this offseason. And frankly, another thing I agree with you on, I think running backs I have no problem with drafting running backs high if they're talented enough and they warrant the pick. But I'm not a big fan on paying them big contracts. So I think you have to leave that for the Saquons of this world. And I'm afraid Ken Walker is a long way off. Maybe talent-wise, he's not a long way behind Saquon Barkley, but he's not quite managed to do it. So and maybe that's part of the problem. Like with Saquon, he left the Giants, went to the Eagles, and was brilliant. Won a Super Bowl. Maybe Ken Walker's destined to do that. I hope not. I hope he can have a great season.
He could really force a conundrum for the Seahawks. I've said that maybe no other player on offense carries as much responsibility for how this offense could do this year. And what I mean by that is Ken Walker having a healthy 17-game season and being the Ken Walker we hope and think he can be, probably the best thing that could happen to this offense this year. And it would translate to the win-loss column, but it would also create a really tricky situation for the Seahawks too, whether to make a decision next year on signing him or letting him go. There's another contract situation that is brewing that we need to talk about that I didn't think we need to talk about because this whole way through the process, I just thought it'll work itself out. It's not going to be a big deal. But something has shifted this year in the NFL. And for the first time ever, we've seen fully guaranteed deals handed out to the first 2 players picked in the second round. That has never happened before in NFL history. I think it was Higgins that got the first deal, and then Schlesinger got the second one. And the third player picked in the second round, Nick Emenwari. And so the rest of the league now don't have to worry about the pick after them because Quinshon Judkins just went and got himself into trouble. He's not getting a fully guaranteed deal. But it seems like the league is kind of waiting on the Seahawks and what they're going to do with Nick Emenwari. Certainly not their MO to hand out a fully guaranteed deal to a second rounder like that. And they clearly have a very important role in mind for him as a rookie. Should we, 8 days out from the start of training camp now, start to get concerned? Because we are hearing some of these rookies drafted later in the second round now say they will not participate without a deal.
It's a difficult one to know what to think about this because on the one hand, I kind of see where the rookies are, given that if it was just Seattle, then I'd be thinking, well, what's the hold up here? You kind of got the slotting, you know what's going on. But because it's virtually the entire second round at this point, you've got a Mexican standoff between the league and the players. And what's going to happen is someone is going to cave and they're all going to have to cave. And I suspect that's why nobody's caving, because the whole league, I'm not suggesting it's collusion. If Mike Florio was here, he probably would be. But I think that I think it's more a case of just everybody knows the game that's being played now. That if one caves, then that's it. There's no going back. I'd be keeping. I think if I was a part of the team, I would be retaining the position that I have. You really want to have your second rounders there and active and participating and involved, but I don't think it's quite that serious that to sort of feel like you've got to change the league forever or go against your principles as a Seahawks outfit just to get Nick Emenwari into training camp. So I hope this comes together. I hope common sense. I always feel a little bit when you have these situations that there has to be a middle ground somewhere. It's kind of unexpected that so much of the second round is unsigned.
Yeah.
But look, they traded up for this guy, and they clearly want him to be a big part of their team. And if he's going to have a role which is multifaceted, which is going to be lining by different positions, trying to have an impact as a coverage guy and as a blitzer and everything like that, he probably more than anybody other than maybe Sam Darnold really needs to have this training camp. So I think hopefully we will sort of hear some news soon of this moving on. But this can't go on forever. I mean, the rookies are going to have to sign their contract eventually. And at the end of the day, I kind of feel a little bit, if it was me in this situation, I don't know, these college players are wealthier than they ever were before. I'd be thinking, I'd say, just give me my damn contract. Let me just get on with this. Well,
the Seahawks have done such a good job negotiating deals, and they do things differently than some other teams do. We've heard a lot in the last 6 months with the Sam Darnold deal and everything else, and what happened with the quarterback situation about how the Seahawks handle year 2 guarantees, and it's different, and sometimes in some cases less lucrative than what other teams offer. But players want to be here. They want to play for Mike McDonald. I would think that Nick Emenwari wants to get as many reps as he can because he's going to see a role as a rookie. And just looking at the second round again, it really does feel like we're sitting at the tipping point at pick 35 because, as I mentioned, Judkins behind him, and then Jonas Savaiinaea, Travion Henderson, the other Ohio State running back, Luther Burden, and then you get down to Tyler Shuck. Certainly quarterbacks are a little bit of a different animal. Teams aren't going to want to guarantee second-round running backs fully guaranteed deals. And so it feels like it's Seahawks or bust. And at the end of the day, my prediction would be that they end up getting a less than fully guaranteed deal with them and kind of break that stalemate a little bit. Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned that I really want to get your thoughts on, because there is something about Ernest Jones that the rest of the league just doesn't seem to appreciate, right? The Rams trade him for a late day 3 pick swap. The Titans trade him to us for a day 3 pick. Everywhere he goes, he's loved in the locker room, and he performs and he plays well. We saw the turnaround the day he stepped on the field here in Seattle. And yet when he signed his deal, we all kind of raised our eyebrows like that's less than we were expecting to have to pay for him. That seems team friendly. And then this survey that you talk about that ESPN's been doing, kind of releasing one at a time with league personnel. And Ernest Jones is not only not mentioned as one of the top 10 off-ball linebackers in the league, he's not mentioned on honorable mention. He is in the agate type at the very end of others receiving votes. What is it that gets missed or overlooked about Ernest Jones?
Well, I think it is interesting because, as you quite rightly say, when he arrived in Seattle last year, you could see his impact, and clearly he played very well. I thought he played very, very well. It's strange because there were games where he would, appear to essentially be the difference on defense and impactful and hugely important to Seattle. And then PFF would give him a grade which basically suggested he was absolutely atrocious. So it didn't really pass the smell test. But then, I suppose what I'm trying to make with that point is that, I'm watching it on the TV, and maybe I'm not an X's and O's guy, and maybe other people and executives, coaches, scouts see things that I don't see with my untrained eye. I'm looking at the list now because I'd not read it. I'd seen you tweeting about it, but I'd not actually read the list. And I suppose, the names at the top are who you'd expect to be there. Fred Warner is obviously a world-class player. Roquan Smith is very good. Zach Bard, Nick Bolton, again, these are not surprising names. I think the top 10 are fair enough. Even people like Demarion Overshown, I thought really came into their own before injury and stuff like that. And the fact that Dre Greenlaw is still hanging in there, I mean, he is a good player. He's probably in there on reputation and past performance because he's just been so injured. And then when you look at the honorable mentions, I think that's where I can have a bit of an issue there because, we all love Bobby Wagner. I'm not sure that Bobby Wagner is like the 12th best linebacker in the NFL anymore. And, I wouldn't swap Ernest Jones to Bobby Wagner. I don't think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is better than Ernest Jones. I'm convinced that Patrick Queen is not better than Ernest Jones. I think Ernest Jones is a far superior player. I've always liked Demario Davis, but he's, approaching 40 at this point. Logan Wilson, I'm a fan of Logan Wilson's, and I suppose, you know, the likes of Jack Campbell have emerged to an extent. I don't think Blake Cashman, Zaire Franklin, Jamian Sherwood, Olakun with the Jaguars, and Matt Milano are better than Ernest Jones. So I think if you're going to have a list, I mean, like the list of honorable mentions is almost as long as the list of the actual top 10. So
Right.
I don't really understand why he's not ended up on there as well. And it's one of the more curious talking points in the league. Like you say, that the Rams didn't want to pay him. The Rams gave him away for a ham sandwich. Seattle hadn't traded more than a ham sandwich for him, but not a huge amount. He played very well for Seattle. There were times when he played very well for the Rams. And he doesn't get a lot of respect. And I quite frankly, if that helps the Seahawks get him on the contract they've got him on and keep him under the radar, it's fine by me. But he was one of the more inspired trades or one of the more inspired additions, I should say, rather than the trades, because I still think they're bargaining with the Titans for Titans get him for a ham sandwich, and you give away a lot more than a ham sandwich when there's half of his contract left. I don't think it was the best bargain from the Seattle point of view. But in terms of a pure player acquisition, he clearly elevated that defense last year. So big thanks to the Titans and the rest of the league for maybe underestimating it.
Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, as they say.
Exactly.
There is still a pretty predominant narrative out there now that we get this close to camp and you start to see all of the predictions and the divisional breakdowns. And the Seahawks are still just not being bought by much of the national media. They're being picked third or fourth in the division. And it's concerns about the offense. We get it. We've been there. We've talked through all of this offseason. I want your thoughts now as we sit here a week away from training camp and we kind of everything's in the rearview mirror from what we've seen and heard and read from the offseason. We've talked it all to death. But as we sit here on the precipice of starting Mike Macdonald's second year here, all the changes on offense, just generally, what are your expectations of that group, that side of the ball, and what we're going to see, what they're going to look like this year?
Well, I think anybody saying that they're going to be the third or fourth best team in the NFC West is talking a load of old bollocks, really. I don't personally see that at all. You know, I think you're looking at a team here that had all sorts of problems, like an offense that just didn't function at any point last season. It was a shambles. You know, play calling, scheming, ideas, offensive line was hung out to dry, mixed with not good enough. Just a total shambolic mess. Couldn't run the ball at all. Red zone abysmal, and had issues on defense as well until the aforementioned Ernest Jones came in and they rectified some of those. And they still should have won the NFC West. You know, they should. Yeah. With all of those things going on, they finished level on the same number of wins as the Rams. I think it was something. The difference between the two teams in the end was common record against opponents in the AFC or something. Like it was so tight between the two. And yet the Rams, because they then went on and beat the Vikings quite handsomely and then gave the Eagles a game, have suddenly like been vaunted as like, wow, you know, look at the Rams, like they're a legit team. And the Seahawks, who had the exact same record as them in the regular season, you know, well, yeah, but I'm not sure about this. And the difference now, I think, from last year to this year is one, Mike Macdonald's not a rookie head coach anymore. So that's got to give him, I think you have to give him some extra points for that. You've then got an offensive system that is not going to be as bad as it was last year. Like the scheming and the play calling and the offensive line, which they've invested in with the first round pick and everything like that is going to function better than it did. They should have a better running game. They should have better pass protection. They should have better play calling. So if that improves, then again, you know, it's hard to see how Seattle is going to regress from, you know, having the same number of wins as the team that won the division into the third or fourth best team. And, you know, they've had a draft where they have invested a lot of players. Now, I suppose what's happening with the national media is they're seeing DK Metcalf and Geno Smith have departed. And there's kind of like an overreaction to that. And clearly, you know, there's an unknown as to how Sam Darnold's going to get on. I think there's probably a bit of recency bias with the fact that the last two games he had for the Vikings were terrible. So therefore, it took a bit of the shine off what was otherwise exceptional season from Sam Darnold with DK Metcalf. You know, so much of Seattle's identity for the last few years has been DK Metcalf, and the thought that, well, if nothing else, you can throw the ball up and he will go and make a play. A lot of these national journalists have not watched DK Metcalf. I mean, you and I will have watched every game he's ever played in the NFL, and undoubtedly a physical phenom, an unbelievable talent in terms of athleticism and size, but also bloody frustrating at times. You know, a player who could drop a pass, who could fumble a football, who could get see the red mist descend and all of a sudden give a penalty away or start shouting on the sidelines or anything like that. Someone who always threatened to be one of the league's best and never quite got there, and has forced his way out of Seattle and has gone to go and play with Aaron Rodgers instead. So, you know, good luck to him. But people are looking at that and thinking, wow, that's a big loss. And then they're looking at Geno Smith, and Geno Smith is, you know, he was very trendy with the, you know, the cool kids online. So, you know, there are a lot of the people who are making these predictions here. Yeah. And you know, they all see Geno Smith as like one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. I personally don't see it that way. I think with Geno, physically unbelievable moments, you know, games where he did win the game almost on his shoulders. I shouldn't qualify it. He did win games for Seattle last year on his shoulders. The New England game is the one that immediately springs to mind in week 2. Mm-hmm. You know, and you haven't got that anymore. But there were also games where Geno Smith played a large contribution towards them messing things up, like the Rams game, for example. So, you know, I don't know whether losing DK Metcalf is such a thing given the way they're going to play. Because if you lose Metcalf but you gain a running game, doesn't that balance it out? Could you even be better? Yes, I think so. And I don't think the difference between Geno Smith and Sam Darnold is that great. And if you are going to ask Sam Darnold to play within a Shanahan system, which is more quarterback friendly and doesn't demand as much from him as perhaps the previous 2 systems demanded on Geno Smith, that could make life easier for the quarterback. So for me, I think at the very least, Seattle will do what they did last year. And I actually think there's an opportunity to get better. So I am optimistic. I think the Seahawks will win the NFC West. You know, people who are not familiar with the Seahawks draft blog might think, well, you would say that. You are just being a homer. People who are familiar with Seahawks draft blog will probably back me up on this, that, you know, if the Seahawks are not, if I don't think they're doing the right thing, I will say it. And I've not always predicted the Seahawks to be the best in the division. It's not my annual prediction that they are the best team. Right. But I think that the Niners are in a bit of a 2017 Seahawks period where they kind of need to move on, but they don't quite prepared to do it. And they've paid a bunch of people, and there's others that want to get paid now. And yeah, it feels like that's coming to a bit of an end of an era type vibe. And then the Cardinals are the Cardinals, and the Rams have got, you know, nearly 40-year-old Matt Stafford, who is good on his day, but he is. I thought he regressed last year. They don't have Aaron Donald. They have got Jared Verse and Brendan Fisk, but, you know, can they do it again in year 2? Like, it's, you know, they don't have Cooper Kupp anymore. You know, they have got Puka Nacua, but, you know, it's. I'm confident the Seahawks are going to have a good season. I'm tipping them to win the NFC West.
Well, you're the first person to say that on this show. So, and count me as one of those surprised that you would, because I've seen it. You have an ability to be as brutally honest about the Seahawks, regardless of your affection for them, as anyone. So I'm going to walk away from this show feeling pretty damn good about myself. I do think among the national media, I think there's some fatigue that set in this offseason too, because they're so tired year in, year out during the offseason of talking about the offensive line and is it going to be turned around and are they going to do it this time and is the running, that they just stopped talking about it. And they've all just taken I'll believe it when I see it. And they don't want to hear all the things that we talk about. They don't want to hear about the coaching changes and the scheme changes and how it fits better and the alignment and the staff. They're just tired of talking about it. But yet, to your point, they're completely willing to sweep everything under the rug when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers, apparently, a team that I believe, while they have more blue chip players than the Seahawks, have more roster questions as we sit here today entering camp. And yet, so many in the national media just seem to think they're going to bounce back and get 10 or 11 wins and push the Rams for the division. There's some really interesting narratives this offseason that I've had a hard time wrapping my head around.
Yeah, I think with the Niners, they're getting a lot of credit for the fact that Robert Sala's come back, and
Mhm.
Robert Sala's a good defensive coordinator. There's nobody should diminish that. I'm certainly not going to do that. But there seems to be sort of this feeling that just because he's come back, everything's going to be fine. Like the defense will go back to being amazing. And I look at the defense that he had when he was the defensive coordinator last time. He had Fred Warner at his young, youthful best. Dre Greenlaw was there at his best. They had Nick Bosa, Arik Armstead, and DeForest Buckner at their best. They had complementary edge rushers. They had him. They had, Richard Sherman was there, still playing at a high level. They had so many. It was an absolutely loaded team with, in particular, a loaded front seven. And now he's returning to a team with Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. Now that can still produce
Bunch of
some
rookies.
that Fred Warner is an excellent player. Nick Bosa is a game-wrecking pass rusher. I wish we had somebody like that. But they are not what they were. And he's going to find it harder, I think, to coach a great defense this time. And what I would say about Seattle is they don't have a Bosa, but towards the end of last season, Leonard Williams was playing like a game wrecker. Leonard Williams was winning games for Seattle. Leonard Williams was virtually unstoppable at times. If you can get one of these pass rushers to complement him, whether that is an interior or outside rusher, or even if it's your blitzing and your creativity that you get from the second and third level, if you can get somebody to be a partner in crime for him, there's absolutely no reason why Seattle can't have the best defense with a coach who clearly knows what he's doing on the defense. So I'm very optimistic that Seahawks are going to have a good year. I think it's a wide open NFC. I think there's probably going to be growing pains for the offense, but I think we will see. My expectation is that, the defense had a tough start last year and then got it right by mid-season. I think that's what's going to happen for the offense. I think if you're going to give Robert Saleh and the Niners credit, I think you've got to give the Seahawks credit for going for Clint Kubiak and getting somebody who I think knows what he's doing with an experienced staff around him. I think that's an upgrade for Seattle, even more so than getting Saleh back in the Niners. So I think it's going to be good. I like the look of the schedule. I think week one's going to be interesting. And I do think that the Seahawks have got an opportunity to be a team that, when it gets to sort of the December weeks, they're going to be in the mix. They're going to be in the mix. And if they can get into the playoffs, I think there are probably there may be 10 teams in this conference who think if we get there, we've got an opportunity. Let's not forget, a year ago, no one was tipping the Philadelphia Eagles to be what they were going to become. Right. And they started the season looking like an absolute disaster zone, the Eagles, and the coach was getting the cat. The coach is showing the middle finger to the fans after they beat the Browns by like 3 points. In week 3 or 4, whatever that was, they won the Super Bowl. He got a new contract, that coach. They were talking about firing him after the first month of the season.
Yeah.
So the NFC's wide open. So I don't think the Seahawks are going to win the Super Bowl, but I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that they get to the playoffs and are one of the teams that could do okay.
Well, you heard it here first. Rob Staton thinks the Seahawks are going to win the NFC West. So that is a really good way to end this episode and go into a 4 or 5 day break for the show as I pack everything up and head back to the West Coast. So we'll have to get together week one and have a pint and meet in person finally. Yeah, absolutely. It'll be good to see you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to that game because I think it's I've got a ticket for the Mariners game as well, so I'm hoping that they're still in the mix while I'm out there because nice. that'd be good to sort of see a bit of an atmosphere there.
That'll be a fun weekend. Who are they playing that weekend?
St. Louis, I think.
Okay.
And the Cardinals, I think.
All right. See some big dumper the same week as you see the Seahawks and the 49ers play. Yeah. All right. Rob, thanks. It's always good to see you. We'll catch up in about a month.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, what do you think of that? I finally got someone to tell me on this show that the Seahawks are going to win the NFC West. Well, I didn't get him to tell me that. He just volunteered it. And it's one of the things I love about these conversations and these interviews is, sometimes, especially with interview subjects that I don't know very well, I will map out bullet points, sort of a roadmap of questions I want to ask, and then let the conversation take us where it does naturally. I don't ever want to just stick to the bullet points. That's not good interviewing. In this case, and with someone like Rob, like no notes. I knew we could just shoot the shit about the Seahawks and some good stuff would come out, and that happened again today. Seahawks Draft Blog, check him out there. You'll also find Curtis Allen's work there. You've seen Curtis here on the show before with his accounting background talking about salary cap issues. And he recently on the Draft Blog also breaks down some potential contract extensions with actual numbers and parameters on some of those guys we talked about today that are eligible for extensions. So check that out as well. All right, guys, I'm packing it all up. I'm hitting the road tomorrow. Be back in Seattle Sunday-ish, I think. Plans may change along the way. And then I'll be there for training camp on Wednesday, the 23rd. One last reminder, I'll be given access those first few days, and then I'm given the opportunity to sit and meet with the media relations folks and hopefully get credentialed for the entire year. And if that happens, then I plan to cover the team in full for the entire year. Again, all the ways, period, that you can support me as a full-time content creator are listed and linked down below. So enjoy yourselves over the next couple of days. If there's any huge breaking news, a big trade or a contract extension, anything along those lines, I will, as much as I can, try to react to it from the road. Until then, follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Forever and always go Hawks. Thanks again to Rob Staton. Thank you to the Blue Wire Network. Thank you to you for watching and supporting. I'll see you next time.